Welcome into you know what? It's the state of Iowa's perfect week. Perhaps you're listening to this after games that had already happened. But as of last week, the state of Iowa, men's and women's basketball programs between Iowa State, Drake, UNI, Iowa, 14-0 last week. And so, this is Kicking It. We're kicking ass. That's what we're doing, Grant Mahoney.
Taking names.
Or just kicking ass. Why do you take names? Why does one take names? And it feels like you should take names and then kick ass, right? Like, because it sort of feels like it comes in, or you like coming in guns a-blazing, but you're not really sure where the guns need to be a-blazing to, versus like, I'm just going to kick somebody's ass. Then I'm going to figure out whose ass I'm supposed to kick.
Well, I think that's more of like a kicked your ass, write your name down. Kicked your ass, write your name down.
Oh, so it's like a ledger, like a win-loss ledger.
Sure.
Got it. So we're kicking it, and we are in the virtual Wild Rose Casino studios, which is not to say that we're not in the nice, warm confines, well-controlled sound and backgrounds of Wild Rose Casino studios, because it's -1,000 for the 16th day in a row. For those of you listening in Florida, Tahiti, just go outside with your shirt off. I don't even care why. Just do it. We are brought to you by Kelderman Manufacturing, as always. At this point now, you got nothing better to do than go to kelderman.com. And what else are you going to do at home? You've been inside for 5 straight days. You're going to be inside for 5 more days. There's no reason not to go to kelderman.com just to see what they have. Maybe it interests you. Maybe it doesn't. Just go check it out.
Yeah, I agree. And
good ad, Grant. Appreciate that.
Well, I don't have any more to add to the ads. I just wanted to apologize to the fans, or do I want to apologize for making such a stupid prediction? But if our loyal listeners haven't noticed, usually when I make a prediction, the opposite happens. So I know what I'm doing.
Well, now you called out the jinx. So like the jinx isn't a jinx anymore if you call out the jinx.
Is that how that works?
Does it still a jinx? So now do you have to unjinx the jinx by saying, no, that jinx isn't real, so I can... Jeff Gripes. So it's kicking ass and taking names. It's in the wrong order. You need to take names and then kick ass, because otherwise you're indiscriminately kicking ass. And then 2 is the jinx. When you call out a jinx, the jinx becomes not a jinx, so you have to unjinx the jinx. You can't.
I guess we'll find out.
You can't triple stamp a double stamp. You can't triple stamp a double stamp.
I guess we'll find out, because I'm predicting Iowa State to beat... No, I'm predicting them to lose to BYU. 71-69. Nice.
It's sort of like that's what she said in your own statement. So the Cyclone Fanatic Podcast Network is brought to you is fueled by Cody Road. We are going to get right into the interview that we normally have. The Goldfinch Athletics interview today is Ari Temkin. He is the host of Big 12 Radio on SiriusXM. Just Big 12 Radio on SiriusXM from 7 to 10 in the morning. He's with former Iowa State quarterback and current radio voice of the Atlanta Falcons, Dave Archer. We recorded it before this intro. It's good. You can tell this guy, he's a professional talker.
Yeah, he was fun.
He's good. Before we get into Ari, the Goldfinch Athletics thing I want to spotlight. So if you're listening to this week, next week is when we start our Des Moines Public Schools program. So it's on Wednesday and Thursday nights. Go to DMs or Des Moines dmschools.edu. Click on community education, find Goldfinch Speed. It's a free program. It's what we do for all of our athletes, whether it's college athletes all the way down to elementary school kids. And this program is kind of free to you. So it starts next week as of the time of this recording. There's still spots available. There are at least 25 kids signed up for the junior high program, and there are at least 15 kids signed up for the elementary school program. So the more the merrier. We have enough coaches to handle it. It's a fun time. So if you're in the Des Moines School District, it is a free service to you, no matter where you're coming from. You just have to be able to get to Central Campus on Wednesdays and or Thursdays, depending on how old you or your child are. So, check it out, everybody.
Without further ado, let's dive into the interview.
Ari Temkin, everybody. So now we're going to welcome in Ari Temkin. He is with SiriusXM Big 12 Radio. You're going to catch him every morning from really early until not quite as early. Ari, welcome, man.
Not that early. Some shows start like 5:30 or 6, so we're 7 to 10, so not terribly early. very conveniently early. I like to say
appropriately early. And you do actually host the show with a former Cyclone, with Dave Archer. So
did he play at Iowa State? Is that where he played?
I don't know what you're talking about. He had never mentioned it before.
I thought I was doing this whole time. I thought I was doing the show with Seneca Wallace.
I think their game is a little different. Dave Archer and Seneca Wallace is just a little different playing style. So it's fun when we get like national guys on, and just to get a perspective on stuff that we're kind of seeing from Iowa State's side, and like the most recent news in Big 12 land, we can just kind of dive right into it, is the fact that Jed Fish went from Arizona to Washington. Lance Leipold was linked to that job. Matt Campbell was linked to that job. Chris Kleiman was linked to that job. I don't think Brian made the list.
Short list.
He's on the short list to Arizona. Replaced Jed in Arizona.
They want to go way backwards. Hey, you have the highest scoring offense.
Hey, zig while everybody zags. That's what it's all about.
So one of the things about like looking at the new Big 12, when Texas and Oklahoma leave, those two teams, depending on the year, one of them is going to be really good in football, and kind of like you have to overcome that 800-pound gorilla to become the champion. Well, when they leave, it doesn't feel like there's one team that's kind of the dominant team that you have to overcome, and the 12-team playoff expanding. When I see Jed Fish go to Washington, in my head, obviously the money's going to be probably better, but in my head, he just got a harder job, because you're now in the Big Ten against Ohio State and Michigan and USC and Penn State and all those guys. And yeah, you're going to get 3 or 4 teams from the Big Ten as like conference champ and a couple at-larges to the playoff. But wouldn't it be easier to be Arizona or an Iowa State in this new Big 12? So like, that's one of the things that I'm like looking through this coaching cycle with the 12-team playoff. Are we crazy up here for thinking that the Big 12 isn't like a good Big 12 job is a better job than an average SEC or Big 10 job?
I think we used to live in a world where it was pretty obvious what the motivations for coaches were. And, and it tracked, most coaches wanted to work their way up the pecking order, and they wanted to be at the premier universities, and they wanted to, they aspired to get there. I don't know that we live in a world now that you could obviously define what every single coach or administrator's goals and priorities are. I mean, we could talk about Matt Campbell and all of the different overtures he's had over the years, and the importance that Jamie Pollard and he have talked about being, in line, in lockstep, the importance of cohesion amongst administrator and coach. I think there's a lot of that going on right now with Lance Leipold and Travis Goff at Kansas, which is huge because obviously that's been a program from a football perspective that's been basically an FCS level. Yeah, just an FCS level program playing in the Big 12 for a decade. So the fact that now it appears that Leipold has at least gotten some opportunities potentially to at least interview and hasn't taken on those jobs. He was linked to the Washington job. We'll never know how close he got. And look, these coaches do what they can in order to leverage these situations for more money and more power. And so that's if Leipold got close or didn't, that's what he's doing in this situation. So I just think motivations are different now. You're absolutely right. And so much has changed with the landscape of college athletics and college football right now because of the 12-team playoff, because of NIL, because of the transfer portal. There's a lot of different factors at play here that I think are going to change a lot of this sport over the next decade. And a lot of this we can expect, and some of this we won't be able to tell. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, it's everybody's motivations are different. And it's no longer a world in which coaches are constantly aspiring to get to, Washington and Alabama and Ohio State. And some are, and some will always aspire to that, but not everybody. And there's a bunch of reasons for that, I think now.
One thing that Campbell always says is you're either trying to do something or be somebody, which I think is straight out of the book, Ego is the Enemy. Decent book, read it.
Was that just a brag about reading a book?
Yes.
You read one book the last 8 years.
That was one of the 6 books that I finished last year. I had a goal of 12 and I finished 6 in the first 6 months, and then
0 in the last 6 months. My math serves correct. Anyway,
Yeah.
Ego is the enemy. It sounds like
ego is the enemy.
sounds
Ego
like
is
a
the
book that
enemy.
Matt Campbell wrote, actually.
Yeah,
very much so.
He has a lot of quotes from books because I think he gives the team a book to read.
Also, if you want to know what Matt Campbell is going to say at his next press conference, read Atomic Habits or Ego is the Enemy or Extreme Ownership. Those 3 books, whatever those books more or less indicate, that's what you want. Anyway, continue.
Yeah. So that's kind of my stance. So when I saw Matt Campbell's name linked to the Washington job, I was like, no, that's not
right.
No, he's gonna be linked to almost any opening that there is.
His agent is going to link him to anyone because his agent has to do that in order to get him as much money as possible. But yeah, I think at this point it'd be sort of silly for Matt Campbell to take on another job when he said no to so many other opportunities over the years, especially a job as far-fetched as Washington.
Yeah, and I think Campbell's agent is him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He doesn't have.
That's a great point. That's a great point. He does represent himself. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yep. Kind of piggyback on Jeff's question though. The Big 12 is pretty much wide open now. I think Arizona was going to be one of the favorites to potentially win the league next year.
And they were fun. Like to watch Arizona prior to them leaving, they were a fun team. Like Oklahoma leaves, Arizona comes in, it's the same team. Like it is a team that's going to be way up and down on defense and just zip the ball around all over the place on offense. But yeah, Arizona was past tense.
And you got to think too that you see the exodus with the transfer portal. As soon as a coach leaves, you see the guys at Washington leaving, Alabama guys are leaving. You got to think that some of Arizona's top players are going to leave too. So will Arizona take a step back? I don't know. I guess, Ari, one of the questions I want to ask you is, it's tough to predict the future, but of this wide open Big 12, who do you see can be some contenders that could potentially contend to win the Big 12 next year?
Yeah, I mean, Noah Fafita in Arizona last year were so good, and they brought back virtually, that entire offense. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that offense goes to Washington. My guess is Fafita will, and that he was such a huge part of their success last year as a true freshman. This league is going to continue to be a league of parity. I think we wonder, will there be another Oklahoma or Texas in this league? And I just don't see it. I think what we've seen is what we're going to continue to see. I mean, Kansas State, go back and look at the history here of K-State under, obviously Bill Snyder, and then now with Chris Kleiman, especially in the, the second iteration, the post-Ron Prince Bill Snyder era, where he got it back going again. And now Chris Kleiman, like you'll be hard pressed to find as consistent of a winner across college football. Oklahoma State, nobody's won, Nick Saban's won at a ridiculous level. And aside from the championships, nobody's won more than Mike Gundy, and they've kind of, leveled off. And I'm not trying to say they've hit their ceiling, but it's just hard, I think, for any of these programs that have had sustained success to sustain it at a level that is going to allow for 4- and 5-star recruiting consistently. We talk about it all the time when it comes to Iowa State and K-State and Oklahoma State. And I mean, we're all developmental programs in this conference. This is not going to be a conference that's going to get 4- and 5-star recruits consistently. I think what you do have is in Sonny Dykes and Matt Rule has even talked about this to a lesser degree, but Sonny Dykes certainly has. When you're at TCU and at Baylor and Texas Tech, you're not going to get the 5- and 4-stars out of the state of Texas, but you can potentially get them on the return if they go to an Alabama, Texas, Ohio State. They don't like it, whatever, and they want to return. I think UCF has a similar advantage in terms of the 3 stars, the 4s and 5s in terms of transfer portal. When it comes to the, Florida kids too. I do think Iowa State and Kansas and K-State benefit a little bit from that from Texas. And certainly when you look at the successes that these programs have had in this conference, it's been recruiting the state. But I think when we talk about like the behemoths in this conference, Oklahoma and Texas, what we're really talking about is the big time recruiting giants and juggernauts. I think there's going to be one-offs with teams recruiting at a high level in this conference. And maybe Dion comes in and recruits at a high level because of the history that he has and in this region. But that's where I think it's going to continue to be a league of parity, because I think it's just a developmental league. And so that's going to go in cycles in terms of the development of players overall for this conference when it comes to the talent level. I just don't see any teams that are going to get and consistently be recruiting 4- and 5-star recruits like Texas or OU was.
I think that's makes the conference great.
Yeah, and it's going to be fun. And I think that's what's nice, what's kind of the pro and con of it, depending on how they set up the playoff and who votes and whatever. You're going to have like 4 9-3 teams. Like you're not going to have anybody that's 11-1, or if you do, like I said, it's going to be a one-off. It's going to be when Max Duggan and Quentin Johnston and Kendre Miller, that TCU team, they're going to go one-off, or maybe Whittingham with Utah, they get one that goes one-off, or Malzahn starts to get UCF now in the Big 12 and they go one-off or whatever. But it doesn't feel like you're going to have 2 or 3 teams that are just consistently at the top, like you were saying. But the downside, there's no turds. Like there's 0 turds in this conference. And Arizona State would be the one that you'd think, like, as they're coming in sort of over the last 10 years or so, that's been pretty bad. Houston's been pretty bad, but you get the new coaching staff. Houston was coming from Tulane. They're going to be better than Dana Holgorsen. Then UCF's going to be better. BYU they have the pick of the litter with their particular recruiting style. And I mean, there's no teams where they're just going to be Kansas in 2013 or Iowa State in 2015. Like there's a whole lot of pretty good teams.
No Vanderbilts.
There's no Vanderbilts.
Totally.
So with the coaching staffs moving around, is there, coaching staff's moving around.
Well, and by the way, Grant, I didn't really answer Grant's question in terms of like the favorites next year. I kind of
You don't have to answer Grant's questions. You don't have to answer Grant's questions.
But I mean, Kansas, Iowa State, certainly with the young team they had and what they bring back, Kansas brings back a ton. Arizona probably would have been in the mix. Oklahoma State obviously should be there.
Will Dion ever be a threat?
Yeah.
Colorado.
I think he's a fraud.
So, I mean, the problem was the expectations got so out of whack because of the TCU game. I think a lot of people had reasonable expectations that Colorado wasn't going to be very good last year. And the problem was they beat TCU and suddenly the expectations changed pretty dramatically. I mean, Dion, Jeff Woody could sit here and tell us what goes into winning, right? It's not just putting together a bunch of talented players and rolling the ball out there and winning, right? I mean, there's substance and cohesion and unity and camaraderie and things that are really important to winning that, it's just not about like, look at me, look at all I can do if I'm Shedeur Sanders, right? Like there's a team element here needed. I have no doubt that he's going to recruit at a high level, and especially given he's back, in DFW and that footprint where he's got a lot of good contacts, and he'll be able to get, if anybody in this conference can get 4 or 5 stars consistently, it should be Dion. But then it comes down to the stuff that, you can, that is important to winning teams. And you can win, I think, at Jackson State with a team full of talent. I think you can win at that level doing that. I don't know that you can win at this level with, just a team full of talent. I think there's a chemistry, camaraderie piece that's important to it. I mean, there is. We know that there is.
Jeff?
Yeah, I agree. I think the thing I was going to get with coaches, and this is sort of the Jedfish, and then this is we can pivot to basketball because this is sort of like in the starting the heat of basketball season. But one of the things that Chris Williams and Brent Bloom talked about on their Sunday pod, but I don't think there was one thing that I thought just didn't quite like discuss the ramifications of it. At some point in the next 12 to 18 months, because even the NCAA at the middle of football season mentioned that they're kicking around or pursuing what it would look like feasibility for the universities to pay players as employees, qualify them as employees. If that's the case, the economics of the entire thing change completely. Yeah. Because this is the way that I kind of describe it. I don't know if you see things the same way. So back in like Woody Hayes, Bo Schembechler days, back in the 70s and 80s, their coaching contracts are $300,000, which nowadays is what, like $1 million, which that's the high end of the spectrum. And so now,
$300,000 is like a positional coach now.
Yeah, or even $1 million. It's a coordinator. And so you have this, you put a water balloon on a spigot, and then you turn the water on, and you put no restrictions on where that balloon fills up. It fills up evenly in all directions. The NCAA did not do that. What they said is that you can't pay players, but they never turned the spigot off. So all the money and the TV money, the contracts, the boosters that get put on because of the TV money, all this money kept pouring in, but they said they put their hands around the balloon and they said you can't pay the players. And so what happens is then you have this bulging of that water balloon abnormally in multiple directions. And so to me, those directions are coaches' salaries and facilities, where you have, facilities that are brand new every 6 years and they're $50 million, and coaches are getting paid. I bet, I can talk about Jed Fish. I bet Jed Fish's contract is worth $9 million. Okay. I imagine Washington, when they then have to also add player salaries, is going to look at that like, ah, shit, we really overpaid on this one. So it feels like when the paying the players' hands come off of that water balloon, the rest of there's going to be some turmoil when that balloon kind of wiggles itself back into place. But coaches' salaries are going to come down, facilities are going to come down, and paying the players is going to even everything out. So then a good coach's salary is $4 million as opposed to $10 million. I don't know if that's like, there's no real question, but like, there was just a thought that I had just looking at all these coaches changes that are getting paid $10 million. It feels like that is very quickly going to be coming to an end because the economics of the sport won't really allow for it when everybody becomes employees.
I think it's a great point. And I don't know that I ever thought about it that way from the standpoint of like an entire economy manifested itself out of thin air. And one of the largest expenses of that said economy wasn't accounted for, which is paying the players. So like suddenly there's all these resources and money going in and coming out and allocated in different places. And it's like, well, we never allocated money to go to the players because we never were going to pay the players. And now suddenly like, well, we don't have any money to pay the players. What do you mean you don't have any money to pay the players?
you absolutely just take 4 off the top from Jimbo Fisher's buyout and you got a little bit to pay the players.
Well, and to your point, like it has created this ridiculous market for coaches where they then get to re-up. And like, I was talking about this the other day when Sark leveraged the Alabama opening for an extension. It's like, I understand it, right? Like you're going to give Sark an extension now, but like at what point do you need to go like 15 years, 10 years, 5 years? Like how
isn't he under contract through like 2032 now?
I want to say it was like he had like 3 years left. So, okay. So sure. Like add another, like at what point, like how many years are you saying to recruits that he's going to be here long-term without being like, why on earth would you lock it up for 15 years? Because like what we've seen is that they're like, those deals don't work out. They do not work out, period. Like, so, and you're right. I mean, it's like this business that exists that spent all this money and suddenly like, well, where do you want us to get the money to pay for these guys from? Well, I mean, show us your pocket.
You should have had it in the first place, guys.
Well, the extensions don't always necessarily mean that the coaches are going to stay there too. You saw that Kellen DeBoer just signed, he signed an extension at Washington and then boop.
Yeah, they're talking about Jim Harbaugh, like he's got like $100 million deal in front of him for 10 years. And it's like, that's a 1-year deal at 10 million or 12.5 million.
Yeah.
Because they just keep every year it's a new deal.
Yeah. It also is amazing to me. I don't know who I mentioned Jimbo Fisher. I don't know who Jimbo Fisher's agent is, but that dude needs a raise. Like he probably already doesn't need a raise because he's already just getting paid out the hand over foot. So Jimbo Fisher, for those that aren't super sure, Jimbo Fisher was the coach of Texas A&M, and they wanted to fire Jimbo Fisher after him being above average but not great. So they fired Jimbo Fisher, but most of the time, contract buyouts are offset by the amount that you gain at your next job. So if you're due to pay me $7 million next year, but I get a job in TV, I'm Jimmy Johnson, and I get a job making $3 million at Fox. Well, now you only have to pay me $4 million. So it's like I don't remember the exact language in it. So the contract offset. Jimbo's doesn't have that. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what he makes. So they pay, his buyout was, I think, $76 million with no contract offset. So he could go take a job doing anything else he wants. TV, coaching, selling cocaine. It doesn't matter. He could make $10 billion as an angel investor with a VC startup and still have to get paid whatever it is, $8 million a year from Texas A&M. Come hell or high water, they have to give him his money. Like that contract will not exist in 3 years. No one's going to do that. What's crazy is A&M can afford it. Like that's the craziest part is that A&M and Texas are just on a different level than everybody else because they like that money, the 90 some odd million they needed to pay out Jimbo Fisher. Like they found that in the couch cushions. And here's the crazy part. Texas A&M has all the money in the world and their athletic director, Ross Bjork, just left to go to Ohio State, who
is a really good program, but they don't have nearly as much money as Texas A&M has in terms of like getting all of the boosters and all of the people who give. Texas A&M has more money than Texas. They have more money than anybody else. And that they're such a bad program that Ross Bjork's like, I'd rather be at Ohio State.
I don't know. I just don't want to be here. I don't know where it is. I just don't want to be here.
I just don't want to be here.
Oh, man. Speaking of money, Kansas basketball, eh? I can't help it. So basketball season started. What are your immediate reactions? Now, granted, we're only like four games max. I think 3 games in. What are your kind of reactions generally about the conference or any teams in particular, Iowa State included or not included?
Yeah, I mean, we saw Kansas lose midweek to UCF in Orlando, and that's a program that looked to be certainly the bottom feeder of the Big 12 this year in basketball. So that was surprising. I think, at first blush, it's like the same thing we say about football, where there's like no really bad team or really off night is true at basketball, but Oklahoma State and UCF appear to be those teams. But then UCF obviously went and beat Kansas midweek this past week. So maybe it's just Oklahoma State, but like, look at Houston. Okay. Houston rarely lost games in the American Athletic Conference. This is a top flight college basketball program. They've lost now back-to-back games in the Big 12 with Texas Tech up this week at Texas Tech. So a chance to win 3 straight games. This is Kelvin Sampson said at Big 12 Media Days, he's like, you think about like the basketball conferences being like a dog park. He's like, in the American Athletic Conference, you're walking around, there's some poodles, there's some Shih Tzus around. He's like, this dog park, it's only Rottweilers and Pit Bulls and German Shepherds. And he's right. I mean, it's like a great example of this is life in the Big 12 now. Houston was number 2 in the country last week. And when at some point today, Monday, the top 25 is going to come out and Houston will have dropped out of the top 5 because they've lost 2 games this week. So, I still think Kansas, Houston, Baylor are the elite of the elite. And look, what Iowa State's done the last couple of years is nothing short of a miracle considering how bad their offense has been. So they finally seem to have an offense. It was like football and basketball could not figure out how to put anything together resembling offense.
Oh, you're telling us.
And now they figured it out suddenly. And basketball, and Rocco Beck figured it out in football for some reason. And I mean, in basketball, they're fun to watch now. And when they mix in that elite defense, they're as good as anybody. So I think Houston, Baylor, Kansas, just because they're on that upper tier because they've been there before kind of thing. And then, Iowa State, TCU, Texas Tech, probably in that next tier of teams that are, certainly elite and you think can be Final Four teams potentially.
Hell of a week for TCU. They beat number 9 Oklahoma, which I think they're overrated, but they were number 9 regardless.
Right.
And then they beat Houston.
On the heels of the Kansas game last Saturday that some think was controversial.
Yeah. So Houston could be looking on the barrel too. They're playing Texas Tech. They could be looking on the barrel of being 1-3.
Right.
So welcome to the Big 12. Welcome to the Big Boy League.
And here's the other thing too is what is true today will not be true tomorrow, and that's obviously true across sports. But like, man, you want to really be playing good basketball in February because it's just tough to. These teams ebb and flow. You're going to go through stretches. Kansas is not playing great basketball right now, but that doesn't mean they're not going to be elite team come February, March. And I think the same is true for a lot of these teams. We don't really know much about them. We're going to learn a little bit about them the next few weeks, but we still won't know much about them at all in terms of their ceiling.
This might be an outrageous question. Maybe a silly question. I'm kind of a silly guy though. I asked it last week on the podcast. Would winning the Big 12 conference be more impressive than winning the national championship?
No. Take it from a Kansas guy who's won a ton of Big 12 conference championships, but not nearly as many national championships.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
It's impressive. And look, I mean, Iowa State's won some, especially when it comes to the Big 12 tournament championship. They're all impressive in their own right, no doubt. But, and I guess I'm speaking from a Kansas fan's perspective, Big 12 championships ain't no thing,
We can appreciate that.
Yeah, sure. I get it. Yeah, whatever. That's fine. Whatever. I just checked the AP Top 25. There are, because it just came out, I think, an hour ago at the time of this recording, there are 8 teams in the top 25 that are from the Big 12.
Give them to us, Jeff.
Kansas number 3, Houston number 5, Baylor number 9, Oklahoma number 15, TCU number 19, BYU number 20, Iowa State, number 24. Texas Tech, number 25.
Nice.
That's a lot of respect there for the Big 12, because Iowa State and Texas Tech haven't really played too many difficult games. With all due respect, guys.
Texas is in a receiving votes as well. So 9 of the 14 teams in the Big 12 are either receiving votes or are ranked.
And Texas was 25th and lost at West Virginia, who looked like the worst team in the Big 12. So goes to show you again the strength of the Big 12. You lose to arguably the worst team in the conference on the road and at 25 and still get votes says a lot. Conference is good. And again, I mean, like, what's true today? Texas looks bad, but can they fix it and get their front court going again? Their front court's not healthy. Caden Shedrick's out, and Dessou is kind of in and out of the lineup. Like, they get healthy. Texas could be a team that's elite. We still don't know much about Iowa State too, so we do. But I think they're just scratching the surface of their potential. I'm not just saying that.
I said that last week. I made a dumb prediction, which actually was reverse psychology, and they ended up winning. I thought Iowa State was going to lose to Houston, but I had said last week, I was like, I don't know how good Iowa State is, because they played the worst non-conference schedule in America, like top 3 worst.
Right.
And then they come out and they have a chance to beat Oklahoma. Didn't play very well. Lose Oklahoma. And then I was like, I think they might lose by 12 to Houston. And then I might just make predictions like that the entire season, Jeff. We're going to lose every game.
No
Just
chance they beat BYU.
yourself.
I'm not superstitious, just a little stitious.
That's a good line.
There's so outside of kind of what we talked about today, are there any like national storylines that when we Fran Fraschilla comes to town or whatever, that they're going to be talking about, that we as just Iowa State fans in our little Iowa State bubble are missing in the Big 12?
So broad. What do you mean? Like, give me more direction here.
So
basketball, football,
mainly for basketball. So like going for the rest of the season, because Texas front court being down and being able to, can they resurrect that front court? Or Kansas, like one of the things with Kansas, a friend of mine is a Kansas fan. They lose to UCF. Everyone's light the hair on fire, burn everything, we suck. Every year, Bill Self loses a game they shouldn't in early January.
Sometimes two.
And then out of nowhere, they put it together, rip off like 10 of 11 and win the conference. Things like that, like those are the storylines that sort of I feel like would lead a show. Are there any storylines that would lead a show that we didn't talk about, or at least for us to be aware of in our own little biased little brains?
Well, normally you're looking at a conference champion that has like 2, maybe 3 losses. How many losses will the Big 12 champion have this year?
Yeah, 5, 6 at least. Because wasn't it 13-5 won it last year, I think?
Yes. 5 losses last year. So, and the conference is probably better. The conference is better this year than it was last year. They're adding a top 5 program in Houston. So not everybody plays everybody, but yeah, I think 5, 6, 7 long. I mean, and right now, Ken Palm, which how much do you put? Some people put a lot of stock in Ken Palm. The projection for Ken Palm has Kansas finishing 6th to 10-8 in the conference. So like that is what the numbers think of the conference right now. It is wide open. So like that's your story. Is I don't know how deep in a conference play we're going to know how many losses it's going to take to win the conference. So it's like normally you get to it and it's like, oh man, if this team has 3 losses, like Houston could work on its 3rd loss in conference. Years past, it's like they have 3 losses in conference. It's over. Now I don't think that's the case. Houston's still very much alive, even at 1-3. So I think that's the storyline nationally.
Jeff, I was thinking your storyline was going to be something more along the lines of TJ stops holding Omaha on the bench and he becomes our leading scorer to end the season. But
by the way,
I don't think
TJ he's just gotten a lot funnier and more outgoing and like, you know what I mean? Like I feel like years past he's just been so like gruff and like I'm coach, and now he's just way more willing to joke. Like I've had him on a few times. We joked about his schmedium shirts. Like he just seems way more comfortable. I don't know. He's awesome.
I imagine it's probably easier to be in like a good mood when you have confidence that you're going to score 55 points. It's probably a little bit easier, a little bit less stressful of a day when your entire offense isn't, geez, I hope Gabe Kalsher makes a 3 today.
Because if he doesn't,
if we are screwed. Oh, Jazz Kuntz, you want to make a corner pocket three? Go one.
Man, if only they can go 55% for the free throw line, that'd be something. That'd be nice.
Oh my God.
60% for the free throw line. That'd be nice, man.
Yeah.
My God, living large.
That was so hard. I mean, it was fun to watch them win, but like, especially coming from, now granted, they were terrible. The 2-20 year in, what is it, 2020, when they're just awful. And it was hard to watch.
Steve Prohm's, was that Steve Prohm's?
Steve Prohm's last year. But like going from the last time that you kind of really pay attention to Iowa State basketball being up pace or up tempo Prohm and then Hoy ball, and then they go get really bad and then they start getting really good again, but they cannot shoot at all. That was such a jarring thing that the fan base took a little bit to get used to be like, we're cheering for defense now. We are not cheering for points. We want this game to be 43-39. That's what this final score needs to be. So that was, I don't know, that took a while to get used to.
It's great. And somehow they went to a Sweet 16 in year one doing that. Like, that's crazy to think about. You know, that they, and look, I mean, so much of winning in the tournament as we saw that year, and for Kansas too, who won the tournament that year, you know, so much of it is your draw and just having the right draw and getting the right teams in the right situation, because that they took advantage of teams that weren't great offensively that year. But yeah, I mean, and it's funny because it's like in sports, you can't have everything all the time. You know, like you have this elite defense and you can't do anything on offense. And now it's like, well, the offense is better. Well, how good's the defense? Defense is good, but is it elite? Is as elite as it's been? Probably not. Well, I mean, we'll see when it comes to the end of the year, but I don't know how good their rim protection is going to end up being. We'll see. Ward, I think Ward will give him a different look there, but
yeah, man, he's since he's coming back from his injury, he's been special. Just lob city, just toss it up there, and he's going to throw it down.
Well, but especially on the defensive end, that's where they need his athleticism, because that's what they don't have.
Yeah, and that's something, you know, when Iowa State brought in Oshuni, we really thought he was going to be a big rim protector, and not that he was disappointing because we kind
of like screwed up his knees by the end of the year too.
Yeah. Like he had a nice season, but yeah, we haven't really had like a true like rim protector. And I think that's something that, you know, Hassan brings to us. So glad that he's healthy and back out there. So I've said the entire time, I'm stupid with predictions. I've said that Iowa State's floor is an Elite Eight this year. But like you said, it is
floor. Wow.
You look surprised.
Well, I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. So what's their ceiling then?
That's what I was going to ask you.
Elite Eight.
The ceiling is the floor.
I mean,
ceiling is the roof, man.
Look, I think so much of how you judge teams is based on like, all right, where can they slip up? Like, what are the flaws here? You know, and so that will change, and you hope to mask some of your flaws in certain situations. But over the course of a season, we'll know who these teams' flaws are. I think you look at Iowa State. What would you guys say is their flaw right now?
I would say they've made, so in the Oklahoma game, they made 3 3-pointers. Against Houston, they made 3 3-pointers. Against Oklahoma State, I think they made 4. So I think collectively in Big 12 play right now, they're shooting like 19% from 3. That to me feels like BYU is going to be a big test, because BYU is a team that shoots the lights out of the ball. They don't want to get in the paint. They don't want to shoot free throws. They don't really want to play defense that much. They want to get a track meet, and they want to shoot the piss out of the ball. If Iowa State can't at least match that, because you're going to want to take BYU, bring him into a back alley and shove him in a trash can. Like, that's the way you want to make that game go. But if they don't let you make the game ugly and physical, can you shoot with these better teams? Like, that feels like Iowa State's shortcoming right now, because they're forcing a ton of turnovers. They have decent with Trey King, Robert Jones, and Hassan Ward. They've got big guys. So like a team like Kansas, you can elbow Hunter Dickinson in the ribs 45 times, get Trey King out of there, toss another guy in, elbow him 45 more times. So you can play physical with anybody, but when it gets to be a track meet, can you keep up with a team when they're shooting really, really well? That feels like Iowa State's shortcoming. And they've got the bodies with Momcilovic and Curtis Jones, who have the potential, and Taman as well. Right. They have the potential to shoot it that well, but will they? I don't know. That they haven't shown that they can, because against the good teams, they've shot poorly.
Well, and Taman was so awful last year shooting the basketball. I mean, it's incredible to think of how well he started this year right now. I mean, he wasn't even trying to attempt it to shoot the ball.
No.
last year. So, and look, Kansas's flaw, I think, is perimeter shooting, and they've got potentially personnel in order to make up for that. But so when it comes to like, okay, how far can this team go? It's tough to think you can win consistently in the tournament without consistent 3-point shooting. Like you might be able to win a game or a couple, but to make a run, you've got to be able to hit knock down jump shots. I think that's a big flaw for Kansas right now too. So I would say that's a huge red flag in terms of Iowa State's ability to get to an Elite Eight or a Final Four, because the margins are slimmer when you can't shoot the ball well, right? Like if you have an off night and you're not able to get the ball inside or whatever, sometimes 3-point shooting can bail you out a little bit when you don't have that. And suddenly you find yourself in a situation where you've got to hit shots and knock down, and they're giving you perimeter jump shots and you can't do it. I think like eventually you're going to run into a team that's going to force you to do that. Like you can win and survive a weekend in the NCAA tournament potentially without doing that. But I think that's a flaw that eventually comes out. Like Baylor last year, their flaw, they weren't good defensively. And so it's like, yeah, they can outscore teams. They've got an elite offense, but over the course of that many basketball games, you're not able to overcome that. And that's what happens. So when it comes to figuring out how far a team can go, I always look at like, what's their flaw? And I think there are certain flaws that are just impossible to overcome.
Do you think that playing in the Big 12 conference, yes, it is the best conference in the country. Do you think that is a positive, but can also be a negative when coming into the tournament, in that it's a rock fight night after night after night and guys are just beat up? Do you think that can hinder a team? Obviously matchups do come into play and you got to shoot the ball well, but do you think that playing in the conference night in, night out, or just constantly getting beat up, could potentially hinder a team when it comes to
I mean, we know it does, because that's why the NBA has rest days like they do for players, right? Like they want their best players to not take the pound and the grind of playing night in, night out. There's probably no more physical league in college basketball than the Big 12. So I think over the course of a season, that pounding, can have a negative toll. So I think on the one hand, the positive is you're playing in really tough environments night in and night out. And so that can get you ready to play in a tournament type setting where it's just, you got to get yourself amped up to play in really tough environments. And the nerves of playing in those environments, those kinds of things, having to measure those. But yeah, I think it absolutely adds up over the course of a season. I mean, you get to the end of any season in sports and you talk about like health, nobody's fully healthy. Everybody's just going off of whatever fumes they have over the course of the season, but lingering maladies and issues like that, I think they're exacerbated in this conference. Absolutely.
Jeff, what else you got?
I was gonna say, what a bright way to finish this. I don't know. I feel like this is insightful, and it's also nice to know that people do care about Iowa State, even if you are forced to be in a room with somebody who went to Iowa State most mornings, or even a digital room, even if you're not recording exactly together. So thanks for giving.
Of course, people care about Iowa State. Look, and by the way, I've told you this before, Jeff. I told Chris this. I've told everybody. Like, I love Cyclone Fanatic. I'm not just saying that because I'm on this. Like, I listen to you guys all the time. You guys do fantastic work. It's one of the websites I go to when I'm looking at. I mean, it is the first website I go to and looking through for Iowa State coverage. So you guys do a fantastic job, and you guys cover it so well. And it's not just covering it and getting great insights, but also like just the BS between all of the guys. It's fun. It's fantastic. And I love it. But like when Texas and OU made the decision to leave the conference and it looked like the Big 12 might not exist anymore, like here we were, whether it was Lawrence, Kansas, or Ames, Iowa, or Manhattan, Kansas, or Stillwater, Oklahoma. I think it was all these college towns across this conference that had been together for so long. And it was like, yeah, we do matter. We do matter. And we are a lot bigger than you think we are. And I know that like sounds kitschy and hilarious in some regards, but like it looked like we were going to die and the Big 12 is not going to exist anymore. And all of these teams in this conference were not going to exist anymore. And you know what? The strength of this conference, the strength of the fans of this conference, I'm not just saying this, lifted the conference up to a point to where they made the decision to bring in Brett Yormark. He leveraged the eyeballs this conference had, which is everybody that's listening to this right now, all the fans in Ames and Manhattan and Lawrence and Stillwater and Lubbock and on and on and on. All of those eyeballs became the huge deal that the Big 12 was able to pull together to get ESPN and Fox to agree to do an extension, which then allowed for the Pac-12 to crumble, which allowed the Big 12 to thrive and survive and exist. I'm not saying that's going to be here forever. And I think the next 10 years, we'll see if the Big 12 has the survival instinct in it. But it is the strength of this conference. And these towns and these states were our support is what kept this conference alive and thriving. And it's these environments that keeps this conference alive and thriving. It's Hilton Coliseum. It's Allen Fieldhouse. It's all these incredible environments, guys. That's what it is. That's what did this.
Man, that's a way to end it. You have my vote, sir. You have my vote.
I was going to tell him what my thoughts were on Hunter Dickinson and Rob Jones, but I think I might need to
we'll keep
that out of it.
Well, it's something about a locker and stealing a girlfriend. I'm just guessing that's what it is.
Yes.
Well, thanks.
He's a great heel.
That's 100%.
He's a perfect
100%.
heel.
Well, thanks for coming on, Ari. This is good.
Thanks for asking me.
Thank you.
Like I said, I'm constantly listening and checking out Cyclone Fanatics. So thanks for asking me. This is it's been a lot of fun for me too. Appreciate it.
That was fun, man. I said kind of before that it just God knows what he's doing talking wise. And I feel like the very end there, it's caucus day. As I think, is it caucus day today or tomorrow? Anyway, it's 1 or 2 days. If that's a stump speech, I'm voting for Ari Temkin. I don't know what it's for, but I'm voting for Ari Temkin.
Yeah, I wanted to just stand up and walk to Dallas and give him a high five. I don't know what that was. That was great.
It's just incredible.
Fired me the funk up.
I don't know. So Iowa State this week has 2 road games for the men. I think the women have one home game on Saturday. They have 1 road game early in the week. We'll see how that goes. We'll be back with Kicking It next week, hopefully after another satisfactory basketball week.
Yeah, the men are ranked 24th. I see. I'm not sure if the women, if the rankings have come out yet. Got to think
also 24th.
Hey,
let's go. Couple 24th,
24 across the board.
That's right. So playing good ball. I mean, playing just great ball right now. The women are sitting atop the Big 12. I think they're tied with Kansas State right now.
So cool.
Yeah, and the men are. The men's Big 12 is just a big cluster right now, but it'll sort itself out. So fun league. Great time to be a Cyclone fan right now. So if you have nothing else to say, Jeff, I will thank our loyal fans still listening to the show, still tuning in. And as always, remember, adopt, don't shop.